Hi, I'm Tim Miller. I'm an associate at Central Careers Hub, and with Barbara Hamnett co-hosted and curated today's session. The key focus of our first half of the session was on what we call GWIST, our framework for successful entry into medicine. GWIST stands for grades, work experience, interviews, subject knowledge and how to demonstrate it, and tests. And we recognise that a successful application to medicine requires students to get all 5 of those elements absolutely right in order to have a chance. So we were trying to communicate to our audience today, in all that we were saying, how each of those 5 elements comes into play in the applications process for medicine. Hopefully we've managed to do that, and hopefully with the materials that you're getting today and the comments from other speakers that you're getting, you're going to get that information as well. So there's a lot of levels before the interview, hurdles before the interview, which, rather like the Grand National, people fall at. And that's really where GWIST comes in, to try and make sure that students recognise all of these different aspects they've got to get right. And equally, I think it demonstrates that actually, if a student prepares well for interview, I'm not saying that I don't particularly believe in some of the kind of paid things of coaching and coaching for interviews, but through some sensible support work in school, both between students and in their interactions with you and mock interview work of that kind, that students who are well prepared for the type of interviews they get, we'll be talking about the particular types of interviews later on, they've got a good chance of success when they get to that stage. Here we've got the quote from Leeds. Last year, over 40% of applicants achieved full marks on our academic scoring system, which requires 9 A-star grades at GCSE. So to get the full marks in their scoring criteria, you needed to get 9 A-stars at GCSE. It's important too, at the GCSE stage, that we as advisors get it right in terms of what do we advise students to pick in terms of subjects for A-level. If a student in year 11 is thinking in terms, potentially, of medicine, that they get the right advice about subjects to take. And that will come up, I think, when we look at the A-level subjects, will become clear.
Or indeed, Tim, at year 9, where a lot of schools make the choices at year 9, or even year 8 in some cases now, it's important to get the options open, to keep the options open at that stage, for the point that Tim is making.
Absolutely. But clearly, as we see from the Leeds point here, you're not going to get anywhere in any scoring system unless you're excelling really in the English, maths and science, GCSE especially. Finally, on the issue of grades, curriculum reform. Obviously we know that GCSE grades from this year's year 11 will be the first year getting GCSE grades at 9 to 1. So the entry requirements for medical schools at the moment are dealing with students who are in current year 12. They're beginning to reflect in their entry requirements what might happen when the grades change to 9 to 1. But I think the key points are that in terms of GCSE, that at the moment they're saying 8 GCSEs is whole year, 8 GCSEs at grade A to C, or 4 to 9. And there will be an issue about whether uniformly institutions will accept as their minimum requirement a grade 4 as equivalent to the C, or will ask for a 5. Certainly I've come across one institution which wants a minimum of a grade B in English, or they're saying a grade 6 in future. So they're seeing a 6 as a B. So again, that's something that students need to think and look at very carefully, particularly in the first year of a new syllabus, of course, where we've no idea what the results are going to be. It could be the government wants to make it work well and they're putting pressure on the exam boards to make sure that the results are all going to be great, both GCSE and A-level. It could be that results dip and we see many more students of the kind of the very sciencey kind, let's say, who might get a 5 in English rather than a 6. That might be an issue for them. Chemistry is essential, obligatory for almost all institutions, but again, looking around at the detail, there are 1 or 2 places that you can get into if a student hasn't done chemistry to full A-level. UEA is the obvious one there, where it's not that they really feel that biology is more essential for their course. But others, Barton, London, Newcastle, Keele, you can potentially do without chemistry, though I suspect, given the way they're phrasing it on their website, that relatively few students don't offer chemistry for those institutions. Students need to be aware that where they're doing maths and further maths, only one of them is going to count in terms of an offer grade when universities are making their offers. The extended project qualification, the EPQ. I was at an event last week at a school, and careers event, and a student came to ask me, do you think it's essential that I do the EPQ to help me get into medicine? Now, there seems to be a feeling among potential medical students that this is going to be a key thing for them. But again, not one single medical school is going to make an offer based on the EPQ, but they're all going to say, some more than others. Southampton are very strongly saying that they will, they used to say they'd take that as the equivalent of a fourth AS, but of course now they can't really mention AS levels. But they're strongly recommending EPQ, and some other institutions as well. So I think for a student to do an EPQ, if they have the opportunity, will help to familiarise them with university level work and university level research, and it will be a good thing to talk about in an interview. But given that it's not available at every school, universities are not going to make it a compulsory part of their admissions. So whether your students have done AS levels or not, you needn't worry about that. The key thing is about what are the predictions I've got for A level, and do those predictions really reflect the quality of what I've done for GCSE, or if my predictions are way above what I achieved at GCSE, is the school or college making clear that there has been real development by that student and real progress in order to explain the higher prediction for A level that would obviously be essential for them to stand a chance of getting into medicine. Okay,
Yeah.
On to work experience.
Work experience. I would like to recommend the Medical Schools Council website. It has some very good information on there. And I thought this was quite useful because there is no template for work experience. There has been a shift over the time that Tim and I have been doing it in terms of what institutions say are their requirements. And I think the one that I would, or the 2 points that I would emphasise here are the issues to do with, have you had any experience with caring for somebody? And the other thing is interacting with a wide variety of people. And they've shifted really away from shadowing surgeons or doctors. That's still important if you can get it, but it's not always easy out there at the moment. There's all the DBS checks, so students have to go through that. That's not always easily obtained. And I think the pressures on the medical profession at the moment means we can't cope with another work experience student, certainly not at the pre-admission stage. So there's a very mixed picture, and depending on which part of the country you live, that may also be very different. You might find it much easier in some parts than in others. So I think this is very good advice, these 3 bullet points. And then let's look at what the universities actually say, and they've shifted over the years. In fact, there's a change even from what we said last year to this year. Cambridge saying not prescriptive, recognising differing opportunities available, which is a very good point, I think. Bristol says try and gain as wide voluntary experience as possible in a caring or health environment. Doesn't have to be a hospital. Youth work, youth group, homeless, crisis at Christmas, whatever, you can find those opportunities. And King's say, if you come down to the bottom here, any opportunity where you can interact with the public, a pharmacy, a checkout, or a restaurant. The key point actually here is bullet number 2. What do you learn from it? What are the reflections that you make from your work experience in terms of what were the difficulties interacting with the young, the old, male, female, children, who knows? But it's that reflection that's really important, and I would really advise students to keep a file and notes in terms of what they've reflected, like a diary when they're doing that, because you never know when those issues will come up. It could be at interview, it could be something you want to put in a personal statement, but keeping it live, I think, is really important. Coming on to the interview, the vast majority of medical schools now, I think Edinburgh's the only exception that we found, and they haven't changed this year, have they?
They're still saying they're reviewing it.
Yeah, they're the only medical school not interviewing, but they're reviewing it. But almost all the medical schools now do something called a multiple mini interview. The MMIs are stations that students go through, and we'll come back in a moment to the sorts of things that come up at those stations. But the advice is, know your personal statement, because one of the stations in these mini interviews is often to do with your personal statement. You can't imagine how many students forget to look at their personal statements before interview, so it's really important. So what are MMIs? They're actually, in medical training, a lot of students have the equivalent of MMIs. The one I attended, the students all had to write a commentary on an ethical issue. They had to open an envelope. Inside was an ethical question. They had half an hour to sit and write their thoughts about this ethical question, which I was not allowed to see. And then that was one of the stations, the reflections on that was one of the stations in the MMI, as was work experience and so on. Usually there's one or two assessors at each of these stations, and they score the candidates, and then somebody at the end, the head of medical admissions or someone like that, will be looking at the complete picture, along obviously with A-levels and GCSEs and all of that. How do you choose your medical school? Well, the only ones now really doing the traditional course, clinical, preclinical followed by clinical, are Oxbridge, and even they are mixing and matching a little bit. What medical schools say on their websites in terms of are their courses integrated or something called PBL, problem-based learning, is a bit difficult to interpret because there's a mishmash between integrated and problem-based learning. Problem-based learning might be that the main teaching is done through systems and problems. So it might be that the heart-lung system is one of the real focal points in dealing with the medical learning. So that might be PBL, but most do a mixture, and quite how they interpret integrated and PBL is a bit varied. So I think they need to look very carefully at the websites there. One student said doing the preparation and the homework for a medical application was like a military campaign in terms of trying to achieve. I mean, almost writing a grid and looking at all the things you would need and ticking them off a spreadsheet on a computer or something like that is not daft. Going on to personal statements, there's a whole industry out there on personal statements. In fact, Andy, you've written stuff on the CCH blog about personal statements.
They're read. Generally, they're read in medicine.
They are read in medicine. They're used at some point in the process. Sometimes not at the beginning, sometimes as part of an MMI, sometimes as a clincher at the end. Obviously now there are all sorts of checks taken because of plagiarism, so you've got to be very careful what you write. But we thought this was quite a good set of things to look out for. This was Keel, motivation for becoming a doctor, understanding the role, examples of hands-on caring work experience, back to that one again, depth of experience involving personal interaction. One of the things that we've found happens less and less is families sitting around a table and discussing issues. That's really quite important, but it happens less and less, I think. Reflections, any initiative you've undertaken, work-life balance. Doctors are often very good at sport, they get involved in the arts, they're in theatre and drama and things like that. They're often multitaskers, so They often ask at an interview, a typical question would be, what do you do to relax? And the advice out there is that the reference should be much more academically focused. But these are the issues that between the personal statements and the reference should be addressed. And this is a hybrid from what we've seen out there from the different medical schools. Motivation, leadership, self-discipline, resilience. You've only got to see some of those junior doctor programs to realise what doing a 12-hour shift or more several days running would require of you. Integrity, passion and empathy, intellectual curiosity, work habit, reliability, logical reasoning, oral communication, teamwork and persistence. I think that pretty much sums it up. You'll find slightly different variations depending on the medical school. And the reference, which is, as I say, the complementary element, about 80% of it should relate to subject suitability and academic strengths. Why is the candidate suitable and will they actually deliver? And you don't want somebody to go in who's going to drop out after 1 or 2 years, because the funding for those courses is so crucial. And if somebody drops out, you can't bring somebody in year 2. Somebody has to start again. So it's really important that the references and the personal statement reflect somebody who's going to last the training.
Preparation and tactics then. I think both websites, BMAT and UKCAT, have excellent material on their websites to help you. They've got past papers, there's lots of things out there to help you. If students want to pay enormous sums of money to private organisations to coach them and prep them, that's up to them. But I think there's enough on the websites. If they can get some help from the science department in schools on the science bit, that can help too. For the science paper, my advice has been do past papers. If you're doing, edXL for your science A-level, well, try a past AS paper, because it's meant to be around that level, an AS paper from another exam board, because it will present questions in about the same sort of material you've covered, but maybe just in a slightly different way. One advice would be, don't generally put all the eggs in one basket. It's certainly dangerous to try and do 4 UKCAT, for BMAT applications, because it is more demanding. One finds that it tends to be really the very best scientists who perform exceptionally well in that, and that if you're anything slightly less than that, you may be someone who would make a good doctor in many ways, but you won't necessarily score highly on the BMAT. So don't put all the eggs in either basket, and use the UKCAT to help you decide what's the balance of choices now that I make. If you've got very few students, as one of the latter points here makes, and you're in an institution where you might only have 1 or 2 potential medical students, can you link up with other institutions nearby so you can run something of that nature to get a GP in to talk to 20 people, or someone from a hospital in to talk to 20 people? Getting students to sign up for taster courses. We're very fortunate again in London. There's the wider universities in London run a whole range of taster courses. It's difficult to get some onto the medicine one per se, because it's very oversubscribed, but there are plenty of other science ones, and I think that again is useful evidence on your personal statement, and also helps students just to enjoy and experience a university-style atmosphere. And also getting the students themselves to actually run things for younger students. That helps them to explain things with clarity, to handle different groups, to organise events. That's all useful for the personal statement, and I think really valuable as preparation for the interview.
Hi, my name's Kevin Murphy. I'm one of the admissions tutors for undergraduate medicine at Imperial College London, and I'm particularly responsible for trying to widen participation in medicine. If I had one message to try and get across to people who are thinking about medicine, is to give real consideration to the fact that medicine is essentially vocational training. So it's a long training period, it's hard work, you're going to be tested throughout it, and at the end the idea is that you're going to learn to do a specific job, and hopefully the idea is you're going to be happy enough doing that job that you're going to do it for the rest of your life. So I think one of the issues with students is that everybody sees a queue and thinks they should join the back of it. And basically, because medicine's so popular, so many people are trying to get into it. If they've got good grades and and have done lots of things, they think that, well, I should try for medicine. And what I would emphasise to them is have a real think about, is this the job I want to do? So when we ask for work experience, this isn't just a hurdle we're putting in place to stop people getting into medicine. We're really, really interested that people have gone out to learn about the job that they're going to do, but also from your own point of view as a student, you want to use that work experience to figure out if this is the job you want to do. You want to look at medicine and see it, warts and all, see the negative aspects of it as well, and think that even given the things that are difficult about medicine, the stress, the long hours, the emotional involvement and so on, that this is something that is still fulfilling enough that you want to do it. And so that's why work experience is so important to us and to you.
So my name's Sarah Bennett. I am the admissions tutor for UCL Medical School in London. And so I suppose the biggest piece of advice that I would give to candidates is to do some research before applying for medicine. Make sure that it is really what you want to do. Perhaps have a look at medical schools' websites and certainly visit the schools, go to their open days and have a look at if they are the kind of institutions that you would like to go to and the kind of course that you would like to study. And try and get some work experience with some doctors if you can, but certainly with caring for people, and again finding out whether you are going to fit into that sort of career. In terms of your application to us, is again have a look at the website about what the requirements are for each medical school, because they can be subtly different, and certainly make sure that you have thought about the requirements and then try and add things into your application form that they are looking for in particular. I think if you really want to do it and you're passionate and motivated about being a doctor, then that will come across, and that is certainly what we are looking for across all medical schools, is somebody that's potentially going to be a very good doctor in the future.
Yes, my name's Philip Adds. I'm admissions tutor at St George's University of London for all medical programmes. I think my first piece of advice to anyone considering an application for St George's would be that if you achieve the academic requirements, you will be offered an interview. So we do not look at your personal statement, we don't look at your references, we look at the academic requirements which are publicised on our website. If you achieve that above the cut-off, you will be asked for an interview. And what we want to see at interview, we use multiple mini-interviews, the MMIs, and what we want to see is candidates who are passionate about their chosen career, somebody who has the ability to think clearly under pressure, is aware of developments and controversies in medicines, as well as the rewards and frustrations of a career in healthcare, and also has insight into their own strengths and failings and which parts they will need to develop during their university career, and somebody who can communicate all this in a clear and articulate manner during the interview process. Good luck.
Okay, so I am Kim Piper and I'm the Head of Admissions for Queen Mary, Barton and London, and I'm here to tell you about how to get into medicine and things to think about. I would encourage absolutely everybody to really look really carefully at what each medical school is looking for. So you need to look at the GCSE and the A-level requirements. Don't spend as much time carefully crafting your personal statement, because at Queen Mary we don't review your personal statement unless we're going to interview you, and we look very strongly on how you're doing on the aptitude test and your predicted A-levels. So that's the most important thing to get right. So when you're making your applications to all the medical schools, go to the open days and really put a lot of attention into what they're looking for at the selection. end. And if you don't get an interview at any of your choices, please don't be disheartened. Do take a gap year and reapply, and it's normally because you didn't pay enough attention to that selection process and you applied to medical schools in which you weren't realistically going to get to the interview stage. So don't be disheartened, have another go, concentrate on getting the best A levels you can, and then redo the aptitude test and make an application to maybe different medical schools the second time around. So please don't be disheartened.